Welcome back. This is Morning Prime. Before we get into the conversation, as we are continuing to analyze the economic status quo, let's take a look at this soapbox where we just put together different voices weighing on the current affairs.
Bunge ama jengo la Central Bank Pension Towers ambayo iko tu mkabala na hilo jengo ni bilioni 2.4. Ikiwa hiyo bilioni 6 imeongezwa juu, tunaweza jenga majengo makaribu 4 ama 3 kwa hiyo pesa ya bilioni 2.5.
I want to encourage you members not to join what in my many public speeches I call rejectionist philosophers on the streets of Nairobi.
It is the high time that we agree with the president that we need to make tough decisions that will catapult us to the next stage in joining the League of Developed Nations, Mr. Speaker.
Mbolea kweli ni sawa ama ni mbaya. Lakini mimi naweka imani na nategemea Mungu na mvua tu inyeshe. Hiyo ngine Mungu saidia.
Kwa mbolea ya kawaida hata ukishika tu na mkono tu saa hiyo umefungua, unakuta inayeyuka kwa mkono. Lakini sasa hii hata ukiweka kwa maji unakuta inatoka gozi ya juu, lakini ndani ni mawe. Mbegu haipatikani. Sana tunatumia 6213, saa hii ukienda kwa maduka hakuna. Sasa inabidi utumie mbegu aina zingine.
Bisa naomba Mungu saidieni, munisaidie mimi mama, huyo ni kijana wangu ya kwanza. Huyo ndiye alikuwa tegemeo kabisa, hata ndio nivaa hivi ni yeye. Ako na mtoto mmoja na sina mwingine wa kutegemea, hao wengine hawana kazi. Hatuna hata ng'ombe, tumeuza ng'ombe ilikuwa moja tukauza.
When you want to kill a dog, you give it a bad name. Please, munipe nafasi nirekebishe mambo ya hapa, sababu sasa iko na uongozi. Unipe mwaka moja miezi 18.
That's the soapbox, and I'm sure you have something to say on that. Let me start with Kero. We just put a number of, outstanding voices that far.
Yeah.
Well, what did you pick from that soapbox?
On the Parliament building.
Bunge Tower.
You say the Bunge Towers. This really is a shame. This is an institution that is supposed to be a watchdog, oversight in public expenditure. And we have a situation where a building that was budgeted for less than 5 billion is now costing 9 billion. And by law, you cannot vary the cost of a project, by that percentage. Is illegal. Clearly, it's not. And looking at that building, really, and the way members of parliament have complained about lack of, it's the quality of work that has been done, including the fact that it is incomplete. It's a shame. Clearly, it means that there's a lot of things that have happened in parliament regarding that building that needs to be investigated. And if Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission is investigating other public, I think this is one area that they need to look at. By the way, I think the Speaker is also not right on what is said regarding telling off that senator. I think by law, under the law, any of the Parliament or National Assembly or Senate committees of finance can actually investigate the Parliamentary Service Commission with regard to the expenditure on that building. They have a right, and they ought to actually, they need to look at the entire activity regarding that building and go through it, and because it's the same way that they have powers to examine any other, they have the same powers to demand from the minutes, all the reports of that construction, and look at it and tell Kenyans what's going on.
But isn't it interesting, years later, this thing has been under construction. Did anyone raise these questions, these eyebrows, until now?
No, I think Parliament, generally the relevant committees seem to shy away from investigating their employer, Parliamentary Service Commission. But Anti-Corruption Commission should be able to do that if parliamentary committees are scared of looking at the Parliamentary Service. But they have a mandate to look at the expenditure. Auditor General has the mandate to look at it. The ethics and I think this thing needs to be investigated so that Kenyans get to know whether we had value for money. Clearly, what's going on is not acceptable.
Maybe kinyozi hawezi jinyoa. So the parliament cannot investigate itself.
But
That's probably
the
case.
oversight.
But they should be there.
Is there a point that they get of the court of oversight when it pertains to them?
Which worries me, because the parliamentarians are supposed to be the watchdog. They're supposed to make sure that things are done in the right way. So if they cannot do things in the right way themselves, what example do they set to the rest of the Kenyans? So I think we need to know why that cost was escalated, why nobody took action. And even now you can hear they are saying that's not even ready. So we expect the cost to go even higher. So somebody should be held accountable. I also noticed that in the box something quite interesting about the speaker saying we ignore the philosophers on the streets. But I can tell you some of the people who really know what happens in this country are those philosophers on the streets. The tax drivers, the Uber drivers,
and
the mama bogas, and the voters.
Yeah, the electorate.
So don't ignore them, listen to them. They too have their story. The other thing I noted that was the Minister of Agriculture, saying that if you want to hang a dog, you give it a bad name. I think when there's a crisis in this country, let's not spin news. Let's not use public relations. Let's solve the problem.
Let us solve the problem.
Now on the wage bill, just to conclude that matter, Prof, the issue of centralizing has to be done in the context of law. The national government and the county government, the constitution is very clear. These are two independent institutions. It would be very interesting if the government say that, the payroll for 7 counties will be centralized together with the civil service one, or the ones for state corporations, will be centralized together with the civil service one, so that from treasury then there's one payroll. It doesn't make sense because everyone has its own budget and everyone has got its own appropriations, appropriations approved by the relevant county governments, and so it doesn't make sense. I don't think that is going to work. It will be at the expense of breaching the provisions of law. I think what the government can centralize is for the central government, which is the civil service. You can centralize police, you can centralize the military, the civil ministries and so forth. But you cannot even include the one of Teacher Service Commission, which is an independent, again, constitutional commission. Teachers, you cannot add the one for county government. So I think you can talk of centralizing, but I think it must be in the context of law.
Fair enough, but the law also then explains and it speaks to the enhancing of coordination, consultation of these two particular levels.
No, coordination, yes, but you cannot. How are you going to do that? I mean, the payroll is done. The payroll for Mandera is done by the county government of Mandera. So you'll send it to Treasury in Nairobi just to put it in the same portal and say this is our payroll for the whole country. I mean, it doesn't add any value.
Well, gentlemen, there's a conversation going around about devolution should have worked for people, bring resources closer to people, but as much as we devolved certain functions, we devolved corruption.
Well, look.
That's the narrative.
They say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If the top is corrupt, you cannot expect the bottom to be any different. This thing is one country. So the corruption is pervasive in our society. So you cannot say, look, national government can get away with murder, but county government should not get involved in that. It doesn't. It's one and same institution. So you can't expect that the county governments would be free from the ills that are affecting the national government. That would still be there. It's something that needs to be dealt with as a nation.
So then which better way to keep the county governments in check? Because I think what this particular HR system is trying to bring in place is that we don't have the number of ghost workers that we saw so many years until today, especially in county governments, where I think the menace is seemingly taking over overwhelmingly.
I think what my colleague does want to say, Raud, is that one of the biggest successes in the quotes of county government is that they could do what the national government was doing. So they could hire, they could come up with the deals, they could keep contracts and so on. So what we have always forgotten is that although devolution was supposed to bring services closer to the people, the model that we used was the central government model. The counties did not use their own unique and innovative model to do what the central government was doing wrong. So they just replicated that. And that's why you can see whatever we complain about at the national government is also complained about at the county government. And it's interesting because everybody thought that with the decentralization, things will be better. Every country will become innovative. They will do their own things. They will respond to the needs of their society or their regions. But now you can see what is happening. The county governments or the counties are now being used as springboards to go to the national government. There was a news item last week where somebody was saying that the county officials, governors and so on are in deep trouble because the people in the national government are portraying them negatively because in 2027 they won't take that position. But the idea of having devolution as the centerpiece of economic growth was very normal. but we forgot the political part of it, which has taken center stage. And as long as we don't tame that, we are going to be talking about it beyond 2027.
There's even another aspect that another way you can look at it. The total, what is the total budget that goes to the 47 counties? It's 300 billion. It's 10% it's 10% of the total national expenditure of the nation, which is nearly 4 trillion. So even if all 10% is lost, even if the entire county government money is stolen, you're talking of 10%. National government has repeated time and again, they lose 30% of their revenue, of their expenditure in corruption. You're talking of more than the 300 billion that goes down to the county government. So the issue is really, I think in my view, is focusing on county governments is right in terms of making sure the systems work, because those people need to, and we have the same institutions of accountability, by the way. We have a county assembly, we have the same watchdogs that are supposed to be looking at all that. But the system of the systemic, and pervasive corruption or lack of integrity is nationwide. So whether it's at the county or not, it's the same. So that's where the problem is. And there's no action. It's not that these things are not known. Every year the auditor publishes everyone who has not accounted for money, but no action is taken.
I have a solution.
Yeah, no action is taken. Ask the institutions who are supposed to be dealing
government
with that.
in, government out, different administrations, 60 years down the line,
correct,
action is not taken. We have a functional constitution.
Yep.
I can give you a solution.
What is the solution?
The voter must wake up in this country. As long as the voter votes you in and goes to sleep, we are going to have these problems. But if the Kenyan voter wakes up and watches over the people they put into county assembly, senators, women rep, the presidents, and everywhere, things will change. But now the voters go to sleep. They wait until 2027. They are excited. They vote. We go to sleep. Wait until 2032. They vote. But the voters should always be active. They should watch over the people they put over there.
Let's talk about the duplication of roles, because something came up. IGRTC Chairman Kithinji Kiragu noted that duplication of roles that have already been devolved between the national and county governments has contributed to the growth in the public wage bill.
It's true.
Yes?
It's true.
So we need to work on the duplication of roles as well.
That is very true. The issue of duplication of roles, you see, the functions of the county governments and the national governments are laid out in the Constitution. So in 2003, when devolution came, there is a structure that the government should have followed for devolving some of those functions to the county governments. For whatever reasons, the national government has held on to a number of functions that should have gone to the county governments. And so you find a lot of duplication. Even in development activities, you find particularly in Ministry of Water, in Ministry of Health, in several ministries, agriculture, many of the things that you find national government doing, those functions have been devolved. And we raised, when I was in Senate, these are issues we've tried to raise as chairman of the Senate Finance Committee. We said this is not acceptable. But the government, national government, wants to be seen to be active also in the counties for political expediency. They want to be doing dams in his village. Those dams are supposed to be done by the county governor. They want to run the regional water board in that region because they want to appoint those people who are running that outfit. You remember when the Galana Kulano thing came, we tried to tell the government, this agriculture thing has been devolved.
That's true.
Please give the money to the counties, let them deal with agriculture. Let them employ the agricultural extension workers and deal with all. No, government wants to do some projects so that they can be seen that we have also done something regarding this or that. So, Ministry of Health, where over 90% of the functions have been devolved, and they are largely supposed to deal with policy, and the referral hospital still gets 50, 60 billion shillings annually. And so the Ministry of Health has not been touched. Afia House is the same structure in terms of its numbers and everything that was there before devolution. So these matters have been raised. The national government knows. And the issue is that unless the national government really wants to allocate those functions down and give them those resources and, rationalize, and rationalization, by the way, is the main issue from the time of President Kibaki. We've raised this issue. Why can public service be rationalized? And the issue is political. To wake up and say we are retrenching 10,000 employees is not a simple thing for political leaders. And that's where the challenge is. Despite all these discussions on wage bill,
right.
We're going to see whether really anybody will be sent home, because that is where, in a country where unemployment is a major issue and government is under pressure to get people employed, To wake up and say we are going to send home 20,000 has been a very elusive decision. And that's a lack of political will. And it's been there for the last 20, 30 years. Nobody is able to go through with that, really, because of the consequences, both in terms of the economy and in terms of unemployment and in terms of, the votes also.
If I just picked a sense of humor, I don't know if you picked it as well when the Deputy President spoke to the President directly on the matter. In fact, he said in Kiswahili, "Sijui nani atakusaidia." I don't know, did you hear that?
Yes, I heard that.
There was an honest part to it.
Correct.
When I listened to Carol here, he says it's going to be very difficult.
Correct.
But that's exactly what you're saying. Look at it this way. The Kenyan government, when they came to power, one of the things they said, I remember very well, we are going to devolve these functions to the counties. I remember them saying that. But I think as they got into power, they realized it's not that easy. Because if you devolve those functions to the counties, what are the people doing in the ministries going to do?
Yeah.
They are going to lose jobs. And some of those people are going to lose jobs were there because of political reasons. So what are you going to tell the people they present? So unless there's political will, even the next government will have to deal with this problem. And that is exactly the reason why we are talking about bloated wage bill. Because we don't want to send people home in the counties at the national level. Because we don't want to annoy certain voters, certain constituents. So unless there's political will, we are going to talk about this even the next time we sit on this round table.
You see, one of the most important things in the Constitution was, remember, the provincial administration.
Yes.
And the Constitution was very clear that it will be restructured and, gradually it will whatever. But today, the provincial administration is more stronger than 22 or 3. There have been more districts created, thousands more employed, and it's expanding by, and when you go now to your location, there's a ward administrator from the county government, and there's another administrator from the national government. And this happens, so the government can see clearly.
Right.
So this is political will, really. Without it, you cannot address some of these challenges.
But now let me get to take advantage of your economics expertise. Explain to the viewers what it means by rationalizing staff numbers to align to fiscal, sustainability. And if this will work, because that's one of the things that the government hopes works, they will rationalize staff members to align to the fiscal sustainability.
Yeah. You see, rationalization of public service.
Yes.
One of the things we did in this constitution was to address that, because it was a major problem in the previous governments. We did that by the constitution deliberately limiting the total number of ministries that can be set up, or ministers that can be appointed, or ministries that can be set up. That's why they limited it to 22 or so. What the government has done, the respective government since then, is to circumvent that. So in one ministry you appoint 4 or 5, permanent secretaries. So that means more departments being created in the same ministry. But so rationalization means you actually review the respective responsibilities of these departments of government and ministries and agencies, so that you can reduce them. You wind up some of the state corporations that are no longer necessary. An entire committee of experts went and recommended how to structure it, and up to now nothing is being implemented. You remember the one led by Abdul Kader?
Yes.
Then you come to the ministries. That proposal has been made to government many times, how to rationalize, how to bring some of these institutions together.
So they do have.
So the whole idea is to reduce, so that there are less people in public service. That's the only way they can address the issue of the wage bill. I think that was and you can do that if you look at the functions. Delegate those functions which are not necessary, reduce ministries which are not necessary. But we're in a government where we're selling chicken. Government ministries are selling chicken. They're selling running taxis. Government is involved in every activity you can imagine.
I think when we talk of physical sustainability, we are simply saying you have a number of employees that you can comfortably pay with the country resources. See, that's why you are seeing a lot of money coming from development to come and pay for these salaries and wages, because we have more people than probably we need. And it is interesting because we should be having less people in the government, from my point of view, because of technology. Think of something like how you used to go and look for a driving license or a birth certificate. Those things are online. So by putting all those services online, we should be having less people working for the government. But for political reasons, that will not happen. And I also think that one of the reasons why corruption is that prevalent is because of those too many people. Too many cooks spoil the broth. So if you had everybody working and very busy, they probably would have less time for corruption. But for political reasons, I don't see that happening.
All right. We just
maybe he has a solution.
Yeah, because what Keroy here is saying is there seems to be enough information to have rationalized this long, gone years by like yesterday.
Yeah.
Someone seems to be buying time to bring this up right now that we need to rationalize staff members to align to the fiscal sustainability. It should have been something already done.
This has been a conversation from the time, in fact, when the new constitution was being put together.
Promulgated in 2010?
Yeah, in 2010. When you looked at it, originally, we were supposed to have how many counties, Banakero? It was supposed to be about 17, right? 18. Not 42.
18.
Not 18, right? Now we have 47 counties. And
there are people who want more.
Yes.
And the whole essence at that time was that 18 counties will have sustainable units, right? And you'll have governance units that can be afforded at that point in time. What happened? Our good Astral politicians at the time went to Naivasha and they said, no, this needs to be spread out. So you have 47 counties, which is 47 tribes that we have in Kenya. More or less, that is how it happened. So you can imagine the ballooning cost of running the county administrations from 18 to 47. That's a huge bill that came in. So we set ourselves up at that point in time for this bill that you are seeing now, right? So that is one aspect of it. Then the other thing was the limitation on the number of ministries.
Yes.
That also was there in the constitution that was discussed. And the president was given a little bit of leeway to sort of play around with it. What is happening? You are beginning to add layers and layers and layers, curses, what have you, all these things coming in. And all that this will do is just increase the cost of government. As a private sector group, we said, we've gone through the post-election violence in 2007, 2008. Let us pay a small cost to bring peace in the country and then come back and rationalize it. Unfortunately, we were being too optimistic at the time. That what we thought was nice to do at that time has just taken on its own life. And if you look at the size of the civil service, it has grown, I think, by about 20 to 25% from that time to now. And it's going to continue growing. But it should only grow on the basis that it is growing to serve a known need. Not just because somebody has come in and they need to add a department of this, add this new program, and all these pet programs that different politicians, different ministers add are never removed when the objective has been achieved. They stay there. And so there is a need to have a serious surgery in the civil service and say, what do we really need to run this country efficiently? Secondly, to maximize the adoption of technology to improve efficiency. And actually, let me say this,
yes.
It is there. The government has adopted a lot of technology, a lot of digital items and everything else, but they have not yet exploited it for the efficiency it's supposed to bring in. Yeah? And part of the corruption we talked about earlier on, there's something called blockchain we've been pushing. The government needs to include blockchain in all the digital systems that they have, yeah?
Task force was
yeah,
set up.
there's a task force set on that. But what blockchain will do, it will remove all the corruption because you can trace whose finger did something in that system. And it will be available locally, and you can't erase it. And nobody in government has been willing to say, let's go and put blockchain in IFMIS, in HRIS, that they're doing up all these things. The minute you do that, corruption will disappear, or at least it will minimize to a certain level. And it has to be done outside the system. So I think, for me, it is the willingness of the leadership of this country to make that hard decision. Not talk about it, but actually say, as from tomorrow, this is what is going to happen. And if it requires legislation,
all right,
let us go, and you have the majority in parliament, go to parliament and pass it through so that it is done. Not give it till 2028. 2027, whatever it is, because by that time, people will have forgotten it and we're back into politics.
Now, speaking of which, in fact, I'm just reminded, he said resign. Is it that we lack systems to know who's fake and who isn't? Because if there's a question of if you knew them, I think someone said you should fire them.
Yeah.
So, Carol, what do you think? You have certain positions. I mean, if the president would say you're given until the end of the year to resign, does it mean that there's leniency, or perhaps the government would just take action directly, know whose papers are fake, and sack them? Or we're not even sure?
No, it means the government doesn't know who they are.
Okay.
You know, it's just politicking. They don't know who those 2,000 people are. It's an estimate that there are people in public service who do not have papers. And so they're asking them, please resign and refund us the money. This is PR for me and you.
Because will they refund it?
But otherwise, this is a criminal offense. If somebody fakes his papers into public service, you should not do that. You should be arrested broad daylight in their offices, their desks, and taken to court. That is the reality that we want to see. But of course, this is a PR exercise.
Can I add something?
Yes.
This debate is becoming interesting about fake certificates and so on. Now, one of the reasons why the government wage bill has been going up is because we see the jobs created, whether they drain the public coffers or not, as creating jobs. Remember that in the public sector, you give an order, a department is created, you hire people. But in the private sector, jobs are created depending on supply and demand. Because we create a job because of demand for service, the demand for a product. But that's not what happened in the public sector. So what we need to think is long term. That the few jobs that we are creating in the public sector would create more if we behave like the private sector. So the private sector has about 1 million jobs, the public sector has about 1 million jobs. But the rest of the Kenyans are in the private sector. And that's where the growth is. Mm-hmm. So we should not be afraid that if there are no jobs in the public sector, we should not be worried about that. There will even be better and more high-paying jobs in the private sector. So why don't we help the private sector create more jobs so that we don't keep on creating those jobs in the public sector? So what we should be talking about now is how do we make the economy very vibrant?
Right.
Such that people will be saying, I don't even want to work for the government. I want to go and work for that corporation. I want to go and work for Safaricom. I want to go and work for that company.
By the way,
yes.
The reason why, Patrick, I believe this thing is absolutely misleading PR regarding wage bill. Whether people have fake papers or not does not affect the wage bill.
Really?
Why? Yes, because
Okay.
if you have created a position and you have filled that position, even if that guy had the correct papers, that salary will still be paid.
That's true.
So how is it going to change? It's not changing the amount of payment. So you can talk about performance, but in terms of pay or the wage bill, it doesn't change the numbers. It doesn't change the numbers, absolutely. And I think that's why I think the story is... and by the way, which is worse, when you appoint an ambassador who has no qualification, the Constitution is very clear who should be appointed. Wait, you are asking people.
Right.
You are using fake papers to be employed. But the same officers appointed someone who has no papers, which are required by the Constitution, and sent to Parliament to be appointed. And we are seeing that across in many of the appointments that are being done. You know, and Kenyans have complained, people don't have the competence. You know, that's why we have challenge in public service. It's not about our professionals not having the capacity to perform. It's the leadership of the institutions. People who are running the ministries, who are running state corporations. You know, look at the person who is running the Ministry of Health. I mean, look at the challenges that lady is facing. I mean, and every time it's been raised. Look at ministers, how many of them have been shuffled because of lack of performance capacity. So I mean, this is a wider problem, and you need to deal with the leadership issue, really, rather than focus on some fellow who went with some papers. You'll still be paid if you had the right papers.
You know, speaking of which, these doctors are also, very important in this conversation, and I like that Kero brought it up. They're demanding for the CBA to be, of course, signed in 2017, to be honored. And 70,000, they say, is not really considerate. But you see, the president said we have to live, within our means.
So why did they sign that CBA? Why did government sign if they don't want to implement?
The ministers that time and the president at that time, in fact, since Nakumicha at some point asked the media if she existed during that time. But that CBA signed in whichever government should be honored.
It's not the first time doctors went on a strike, or teachers, or other public servants. It's always been the issue of the CBA. They sign. When it comes to implementing, government doesn't want to implement.
But what is the economic, expertise analysis of this doctor strike? we have to make some tough choices. Do you think that the 70,000 would help the country move a certain direction?
I think I don't know how to put it in a kind of a, in a nice sugar-coated way.
Don't quote it. Don't quote it. Don't sugarcoat
Don't
it.
sugarcoat it.
Kenyans are watching
I think
you.
the competence of the people who negotiate those CBAs is in question. That's the bottom line. Let me go back to I think it was in 2008, when the teachers went on strike in the country. It was a big strike. It was about 2007, 2008. And the then PS, I think his name was Karuga, in the Ministry of Education, they were pondering, trying to get that thing. And I was the chairman of the FKE at that time, and I said, let us go and approach the government and tell them, we do CBAs, we talk, our business as Federation of Kenya Employers is to deal with trade union matters and all the rest of it. And he said, no. But 4 weeks later, he came back and said, guys, help me. So we put people into the ministry and worked with them. Have the teachers been on strike since that time? Never. Because at that point in time, the CBA was then done on a professional manner with the trade unions, and the teachers are large. There's a large trade union there. And it was negotiated down, and everybody left that place, and whatever was negotiated at that time was implemented. And everything went quiet. Come 2017, the teachers are having their murmurs here and there, but by and large, we haven't had a very big upheaval. Doctors, it's been murmuring, and then in 2017, they went on strike, those are 100 plus days, and then a CBA was signed. Was that CBA properly negotiated? I would like to assume that it was. But once you have signed a CBA, you must honor it. And the key thing when you're negotiating a CBA, you got to look at affordability, you got to look at, all these things. And when you're sitting at the table negotiating, those are the things you put on the table.
Right.
The unions are not unreasonable. They can understand when you tell them that this is the reality, so that by the time the CBA is signed, everybody leaves that place on the agreement that, yes, we have done everything right. And that is why the days of strikes in this country, if you go in the early 2000s, up to about 2010, we used to have a lot of strikes. But the way, the understanding of the negotiating process, and then the taking of the management of unionizable people to the front line, to the frontline staff, who understood how to manage people at that level, meant that we had less. So the doctor strike, I think the government, and it doesn't matter who is in that job at the moment, it is the government, right? Whether it was negotiated in 2015 and is still valid now, it is the government of Kenya, and you have been employed by the government of Kenya to run that ministry. So don't say it is somebody else's job, it is yours.
All right.
And you have to make it work.
I want us to move.
I wanted to add something on that.
Yes.
If you remember, there was a gentleman to the western part of this country called Idi Amin. We didn't like him. But the agreements he came up on behalf of the government of Uganda were honored. And that's the nature of the government. So if you get into the government, if you inherit a government, you inherit all the liabilities and everything about the government. And you cannot come and say it was that person.
Correct.
So even if the CBA was not signed by you, the other person signed on behalf of the government.
Correct.
And a very good example is the debt. Kenya Kwanza government inherited a lot of debt from China and elsewhere. They cannot say it is Uhuru Kenyatta who signed on behalf of the government. You have to pay those debts. You have to commit. So in the same way, if somebody signs CBA, you have to honor it. And as an economist, I'm concerned about these CBAs, because if they are not honored, that has an effect on the morale of the workers. It has an effect on the productivity. Yeah. So the government might think we have won against doctors, but tomorrow they'll just report to the office and sit until the end of the day.
And I just want to take us back a bit in history when, of course, President Uhuru Kenyatta then spoke on this wage bill some time back. And with the help of my team, I'm hoping that is ready. All right, so we'll be looking at it shortly. But it's a conversation that did not start with the administration of Kenya Kwanza. However, these are these same people. Remember when we brought in the different taxes, 2023, the housing levy. In fact, now if you follow closely the final development on the housing, levy, some calling it tax, etc. These are the same civil servants who at some point, I think, went on a festivity without their pay. All right, so either way, I think the conversation is how do people work, get value for their efforts as they go to work? Because I think one of our economists here has mentioned that morale is also important for this same nation, that people need to go to work and get, that particular gain for it. And you assessing the economy, he also talked about a vibrant economy. With your lens, how then should the government behave at this point in time, even though we're seeing the Iranian-Israel war peeping around, to ensure that Kenyans are not suffering at the expense of all this?
Patrick, this government must keep its commitments. If you have found money to pay Eurobond, because it's a commitment that was made by the government, you should also find money to pay these people who have committed through a CBA. This is very important because universal health care is one of the key flagship projects of this administration. How are you going to achieve universal health care? It's not about putting machines in the hospitals. It's about people. If you are not going to get those people to work, then what happened to all your plans about the universal health care? And two, when this government was campaigning, like they said through their manifesto, they have everything of theirs was in the manifesto. There is a provision in their manifesto that they will be addressing the issue of these people, because they met with medical workers, they met with the doctors, they met with everybody. I remember, particularly the KE administration during their campaign. And so today then, after coming to power, you say, no, sorry, you are unreasonable. And these guys are not come up with something new. And the court yesterday actually made a very important observation. It said, why don't you just sit and talk first? This is what doctors said. Can we sit on a table?
But the CS said she extended an invitation. There was a sit down.
Yeah, but you see.
So what do you mean sit down?
No, it's not about.
It's not about extending an invitation to a sit down. There are conditions.
There's a process.
There are conditions
to it. Yeah.
And what you need to do, and this is where you need to understand the whole relationships within the tripartite. Yeah, the employer, the employee, and the government. There are three different things. Now, if you're the government and the employer at the same time, you're two arms of that thing. You cannot operate as a government without considering the fact that you're an employer at the same time. So this tripartite agreement, there's a Ministry of Labor, there's the employer, and then there's the employee. Right? The Ministry of Labor is sitting here, and this whole of government approach is now you're saying you're bringing the whole of government, both as an employer and government, to sit with the trade unions. They're completely disadvantaged. And at that point, as you tell them to come and sit, they're going to be sitting with two people who are already thinking the same way. They're going to feel disadvantaged. So what needs to happen is that they need to form a proper negotiating team that will sit with these people at a table. Not threaten them, not tell them we're going to sack you, which is, you're hearing all those things. County government saying you guys go back to work or you're going to sack you.
But didn't President Uhuru Kenyatta say the same thing in 2017?
Yeah, and he did. But what happened?
And they went back.
For the same reason?
No. It's the same reason. And then they went and sat down, talked on the CBA, signed it, and then they went back to work. But part of the negotiating process sometimes is to call the Secretary General of that particular union and say, listen, instead of whatever it is, let us agree that you will resume some work, and then we can talk. Yeah? And we'll talk, and we'll give ourselves 2 weeks. If at the end of that we haven't reached anything, then now you can proceed.
This is a critical flagship project of this government. UHC, Universal Health Care. If you don't deal with this matter, really, how will you realize that goal?
All right, now let's now go to the common Kenyan. All right, I'm going back now to the layman probably watching back at home who is saying, I'm not a doctor, neither am I in the civil servants, but I need to make money. Is it that our environment pushes people to fake certificates to at least get their economy moving? Yeah, we need to talk about the realities. Is the country economically viable to actually do a business, put up, because the KK government said in support of SMEs, all right, small enterprises, etc. These years now later, is this what you're seeing on the ground? Are the economics working for the common Mwananchi watching this morning? to survive and not be able to fake their certificates to fit in a particular job, to be able to put food on the table?
Maybe before I respond to that very hard question, the issue of CBA, I need to add 1 or 2 words.
Yeah, because of...
So the reason why we come up with CBAs is 2 reasons. You need to protect the worker against inflation, and you need to make people more productive. So one of the long-term solutions we need to have is to index wages and salaries. So that inflation goes up by this %, your salary should be adjusted accordingly. Now you are telling people not to honor a CBA that was negotiated many months ago or many years ago, and inflation has gone up, and new taxes has gone up.
Inflation?
Yes, inflation has been going up, and then taxes have been going up.
What we have now is the inflation stood at 5.7% last month compared to the 6.3%
It just went down recently.
Yes.
But if you look at from the time the CBA was signed up to now, inflation has been going up. There are new taxes, the cost of living has gone up. So what the workers are saying is, we work, can you give us a fair compensation for our work? And the risk we run is that people will work by sitting down. They'll go to the office, but they'll not work. And that's why I agree with my colleagues that CBA should be negotiated with all the seriousness it deserves, so that you can protect the workers from inflation, you can protect them from new costs and so on, because they are workers. If you don't do that, you're not going to get them work. And the problem we have is that if I feel I'm not fairly compensated, I will do enough work to cover what I feel is my compensation. And probably you can't do something about it. By the way, doctors is a very sensitive issue, because even the president goes to a medical doctor, even the deputy goes to a medical doctor. And you can't control doctors that much compared with the workers or manufacturers or people on the factory floor. That's why you need to honor this, sit, negotiate, and honor that, because we are going to be affected. Now, the question of fixed certificate.
The common one I'm watching this morning is saying, where am I in this conversation?
Interesting. I think the issue of fixed certificates, in my opinion, we have put too much premium on qualification, not what people do. For example, when you get an extra degree, you'll probably be paid more money, but work less. So that has become an incentive for people to seek fake degrees, because they will be paid more salary and work less. And I think it's a time we respected work in this country, so that the person on the streets who drives a taxi, who sells burger, who does those things, also gets fair compensation. One of the things I found in developed countries, which I think we need to start emulating, apart from copying their constitution, is to compensate people for the work done. I remember one time in another American institution, parking my car at 8 in the morning. And another lady came and parked a car next to me. Then this lady I discovered was cleaning our offices. And she would come at 8 in the morning, 10 a.m., 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. and asking you, do you have anything to be cleaned in this office? And her car was better than mine. And I asked her, how can you be sweeping and your car is better than mine and I'm a professor? She told me, I'm well paid. So if people were paid depending on productivity and depending on what they do, not based just on qualifications, I think would substantially reduce the problem of fixed certificates.
All right.
Because some of the most important jobs done in this country are not based on certificates. They are based on what you can do. And the same government has come up with the issue of equivalency. That can this experience be used in lieu of qualifications? Or can we give you a certificate because of this experience, because of what you can do? Finally, when you go to see a mechanic, do you ask him for his qualification? The mechanic? Or the plumber? No, you just want work well done. Can we use that approach in other sectors of the economy?
Carol, are experts listened to in this comment?
Your question, I think I may not sound very optimistic. I don't want to be accused of being a pessimist, but the fact is, on the ground, the ordinary Kenyans do not really feel any significant change in the economy. Their cost of living is still pretty high. When they go to the shops, they still find things are very high, very expensive.
But the cost of sugar went down?
Yes, at least for food. Food, at least things like unga, things have gone down, and sugar, but still, you know, people don't live by bread alone. People do a lot of other things. They have to pay school fees, they have to go to hospital, they have to do a lot of things, and everything is still expensive. The cost of living is still pretty high for ordinary Kenyans. They can find jobs. True, the government was committed to the SMEs, but if you look at even the report yesterday by the Institute of Public Finance, they said it's one of the reality is that the small and medium enterprises and the agriculture sector, those areas that they said they were really going to, whatever the funding in those areas, the allocation of resources, even in the next budget, reflects otherwise. I mean, you know, we've talked about SMEs for a long time, but today, the challenge has been, people have been asked, you must pay taxes even as a farmer. As a shoe shiner, you must use electronic e-teams. Things are becoming a bit more difficult for Kenyans, really. I mean, there's a situation where they're struggling to make ends meet because demand is low, people have no, purchasing capacity is very, very low, people are struggling, in businesses are struggling, manufacturers are laying off people, they have said loud and clear that, you know, the outlook is not very good in that sector because of the high cost of production and so forth. And then you still want to put challenges in terms of compliance for KRA and so forth, which is making things a bit more difficult. And I think the main thing between the ordinary Kenyans and this government has been the issue of taxes. Government wanting to say that, look, we must collect more taxes so that I can improve your situation. They are collecting more taxes. In fact, it was one of the headlines in one of the papers last week. More taxes than the previous government, more loans than the previous government, but in terms of development, it's lower than what we were spending more than 10 years ago.
But did you not see a headline saying that the tough decisions by Ruto have begun to bear fruits?
Yeah, depending on which headline.
Okay, let me hear, because so you do not agree. Do you agree, however? There's certain, you cannot fully say that this is not working. Is it at least working at some point? And because if you're an economist, sometimes they say economists understand better what the short-term pain means for long-term gain. What is it that Kenyans are not understanding in the high cost of living's pain?
No, the economists are there. Me, I'm not an economist. Me, I'm just...
But he's the optimist. Let's hear let's hear it.
Maybe there's something translating on the ground they do not know.
Maybe he can talk as an ordinary Kenyan, not an economist.
Right.
The reality is that Kenya is expensive.
Kenya is expensive?
Yes, it is, to live in. If you look at the basic staples, yes, those ones have not really gone up, but they have gone up. Your cost of maize meal, right? Unga, in 2018, I think was about 70 shillings, 60 shillings a kilo. What is it now?
160.
160.
The bread.
Yeah? So
it might not be the same in all the shops.
No, I'm just looking at like for like, 70 to 160.
Okay.
Let's be then very reasonable and say it's doubled, 70 to 140.
All right.
Yeah, in a space of 5 years. As an ordinary Kenyan, has my salary, my income, from whatever thing I'm doing, doubled in that period of time? The answer is no, it has not doubled. So when you look at your average Kenyan on the street, and in the homes, and in the workplace, wherever it is, their quality of life has gone down. By whatever measure you'd like to actually put it, the quality of life of the largest number of Kenyans has gone down.
Okay.
And they have no control over it because the policies that have been put in place, the excesses that are there at the top have meant that we are putting more tax on every single production process in this country. And that tax relates to cost back to the Mwananchi. So as you're saying, yes, you're collecting more taxes, who is paying? It is me and you. Who's paying for that in terms of what we consume and the services that we demand are becoming more expensive, including the fact that the doctors want more pay. It is all linked back to the same place. So until we've got a situation whereby we are controlling the costs in government and bring it down so that it translates to a more efficient deployment of the money that is received from the tax.
Okay.
As a Kenyan, as an individual Kenyan, I am not going to say that I feel that I am being served by the existing government.
All right, of course, we just want to go back to the developing stories today. It's just important to, of course, keep tabs with what is major in this country, and as far as the funeral and burial of the late June Moi is concerned. We have our reporters on the ground, Emmanuel To, who will give us details of this particular, development. But right now I'm just bringing to you the live pictures, yes, from the Lee Funeral Home. On the screen, those are live pictures from the Lee